Hi, everyone. Welcome to Solar Power World's third Top Solar Contractors Roundtable discussion. We're very excited to talk to solar installers about batteries and energy storage today. This is all in celebration of the 10th anniversary of the Top Solar Contractors list. The 2021 application is open on our website right now, and we encourage any U.S. solar installation company to come out and apply. It is free to apply. We're very supportive of our solar contractor audience here at Solar Power World, and we really enjoy getting to know everyone at these top installation companies each year. My guests today are no strangers to the Top Solar Contractors list, and we're very excited to talk about some batteries. So let's get started with this roundtable. It is a companion to the Contractors Corner podcast, which I hope that you all are subscribed to so you can get all of our installer interviews each month. So like I keep saying, we're talking about batteries today in all markets of the solar industry, from large utility scale to residential homes. I want to thank Panasonic for sponsoring today's conversation. They have their own EverVolt battery system for the residential market, so Panasonic knows a thing or two about batteries and solar. So let me introduce our panelists. Representing the utility scale market, we have Brent Berglund. He is Energy Storage and Solutions Market Director for Mortenson, a company that has been #1 on the Top Solar Contractors list many times. To talk about commercial scale energy storage, we have Molly Brown. She is EVP of Energy Development at GenPro Energy Solutions. And to talk about the residential solar plus storage market, we have Scott Maskin, who is co-founder and CEO of Long Island-based SUNation. So I thought I'd get started getting to know each of the companies and their involvement with storage. So Brent, Mortenson, we posted some news recently. You guys are working on this massive solar plus storage project in California. It has 1.1 gigawatts of solar and 2,165 megawatt hours of storage. So you guys clearly know what you're doing with large scale solar. So tell me a little bit about your storage experience and what other kind of projects have you been working on?
Sure, thanks, Kelly, and I really appreciate Solar Power will provide the opportunity to discuss this awesome market. It's really a lot of fun. It's frustrating at times, but it's really fun. I just celebrated my 25th year with Mortenson and embarked on my 20th year dedicated to energy. And I've been involved in the energy storage market since we started it in 2015. 14 years I spent in wind power, and I thought I was having a good time in wind power that time. And energy storage is proving to really be the same and more. It's a really, really diverse market, and at times pretty dizzying. There's a combination of new policies and new business models, new technology, improving economics, arduous permitting, challenging supply and demand issues. But right now, I'd say that the market still it's really exciting, but pretty unsettled, just with all of those factors that come into play. And as contractors, we love the ability to be able to figure things out and do it quickly. And this energy storage market proves that is challenging. It's also a market that's growing pretty steeply. We've got several projects under construction in the moment. You had mentioned the one that was announced. In total, we've got about 1,600 megawatts and over 3,300 megawatt hours of work under construction right now. A year ago, we were still building 10 megawatt 4-hour systems, and so I haven't even measured the steepness of that curve, but it's pretty steep. And it's also indicative of what's going on in the utility scale market when you look at some of the forecasts. Our work is a combination of solar and storage and standalone projects in Texas and California. Our customers are serving several offtake arrangements, and then several of the projects also have merchant revenue streams. Projects are developing quickly. They're getting much larger. Schedule expectations become tighter and tighter, just like any of the other markets that we've been in. And so there's kind of a mad rush to get as much energy storage online, and it's exciting times.
Very interesting. Thank you, Brent. Molly, how about GenPro? I know you guys have worked on a lot of commercial solar projects across the country. So what kind of storage projects have you been working on?
So currently we're in the process of installing 3 solar plus storage projects out in Maryland. The first is going into commissioning in the next few weeks, which will be very, very exciting. And we also are getting very, very close to NTP on an 11 megawatt solar plus 1 megawatt storage project in Nebraska for Nebraska Public Power District, which will be the first of its kind in the state. So that's what's currently being constructed this year. In the development pipeline, especially in the last 6 months, we've seen that kind of shift to this from the smaller utilities to some of the commercial entities being more interested in solar plus storage, primarily because of weather-related issues. Sometimes it's because just of this want of energy independence, and people don't necessarily want to be reliant on the utilities and the grid anymore. So we're doing everything from looking at factories in Nebraska that want to go to complete microgrids to the ERCOT market, which I was down in last week with putting just a simple battery storage system at the bottom of a skyscraper. So it's a really fun, exciting times with all sorts of clients of all sorts of sizes for us.
There's that joke, that it's the Wild West again. Solar was the Wild West,
Yes.
10 years ago, and now the storage market's like that. Scott, with SUNation, you're installing solar in New York and across Long Island. So how often are customers requesting batteries?
So thanks, Kelly, and thanks for inviting me to participate in this. I'm one of the old dogs of solar. I'm probably doing this now 19 years. It's funny because as technology increases, I keep driving by the first installation that I ever did, and that was with a Kyocera 120-watt solar panel. Okay, and they're still up there working. It's amazing how things have changed. We refer to it as the solar coaster. Right now, what we're seeing, storage in New York really just started about a year ago. There was a really reasonable NYSERDA rebate. There was, again, we always need a little something to prime the pump in New York. And they primed the pump with a rebate that really started to make it, again, we still don't have time of use rate here. So, any residential or commercial storage is just for, it's a really cool bolt-on right now. But what we've seen in the last year, especially because of some of the weather-related instances, is the adaptation is probably about 20 to 30% now, that every solar system we sell residentially, probably two or three of every 10 are coupled with some sort of storage. And then we have such a robust market. I probably have 10,000 installations. So these people are all coming out of the woodworks as soon as the power goes out. Hey, how can I get my Teslapowwow? How can I get this? How can I do that? So we are seeing, and we'll be heading into a time of use rate. We have a pilot program right now, but as soon as that takes event and, our residential storage business becomes not just, a cool, sexy bolt-on, but also it becomes, a revenue generator, all hell's going to break loose.
I was going to ask you what you're finding the reasoning behind people wanting to install storage. And do you think once the time of use rate gets into it, are you going to have like your previous solar customers coming back to you wanting to install storage, you think?
Yeah, well, that's already started to happen. They've been chopping at the bit for a while. Even my early adopters. Don't forget, I was installing systems when, a 10,000 watt residential solar system was $90,000 to install. These are people that were committed and there were great rebates and stuff like that. But what we're seeing now is my client base is so diverse, from the uber rich A-listers in the Hamptons all the way to FDNY and NYPD. They all have their own unique reasons for wanting it. Out east, it's about, I want that because it's cool, because Elon Musk is cool. Okay, I know it's not going to do. It's going to do my CCTV system on my house, but I want it because my neighbor doesn't have it. And then there's a lot of other stuff that we'll get into later in the program, and I'll tell you the exact reasons why it's kind of blowing up here.
Okay, great. Molly, you said the commercial market's kind of picking up for you. Why are they looking into storage? Is it a money saving factor?
Well, for commercial entities, money is almost always a driver, and it has to be with, returns that you're supposed to make on capital investment projects. But that's not the only thing that we're seeing now. We work in really heavy ag communities, and when you have extreme power swings with things like irrigation coming online during the summers, a lot of our customers will experience brownouts. And if you are a factory or an entity that needs to run 24/7 or loses money, if you lose power, then that can't be happening for your business. So now that the price of storage has come back down, it makes more sense for them to be able to create their own mini backup microgrid to continue operations as they need to. So that's one reason. The second is that our rate structures out here in the Midwest are very demand charge heavy. So we've got pretty low kWh rates, but the demand charges on bills are going to be substantial. So if we have clients that have extreme peaks in demand, we can see some savings by peak shaving. And then resiliency during storms. We all know what happened this winter. There were, grid went down all throughout Texas. There were substation blackouts all up through Nebraska and completely into South Dakota. And we're weatherized and used to that stuff, and we were still affected by that. And so there's going to be more and more commercial entities who are going to look for, not just your traditional backup gen power, because it was really difficult to try and, move diesel around during that time period to different facilities or locations. So this gives another level of redundancy within their systems to be able to keep up and running within those periods of blackouts.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah, and then there's always I keep going back to the energy independence, but it's like, I think Midwest people and, the wild, wild West, as you say, we like to be independent. We have to have control over the way that we do things. And energy is one of those things. And people are starting to understand that now you can actually affect that. So that's really important, especially out here.
Awesome. Brent, I'm wondering, how do utility scale storage projects come about? Like, is it somebody, a utility or someone wants to go solar and so they're starting to add storage to those contracts, or how are these projects coming about?
Well, it's a wide variety, and it's very different when you move around the country, and a lot of it has to do with market maturity and a regional market maturity, which can be quite a bit different. Again, if you kind of pick on 6 major regions of the country, but so we just kind of high level, we're in a pretty interesting spot where we work with utilities and independent power producers and developers and technology providers. We see a lot of the market, and I'd say we're at a point now where we can safely say that probably half of all of the PV projects we see have storage planned. And I want to emphasize planned, because just because they're planned doesn't mean projects are happening, meaning the battery projects aren't happening. So the requests are there, but often the battery component is out of sync with the PV development. And again, it's attributable to the lacking in maturity, and there's a lot of reactions that are happening in the marketplace with people, catching up with how to best interconnect a battery when it's treated separately as an asset when generator interconnection. And there's a hybrid policy activity happening across the entire country right now, and so all the rule makers are catching up with technology, and that's really what they're doing. They're having to rewrite their rules to catch up with this new technology. The most active part of the country is California and Texas, developing in mountain states and Pacific Northwest, and then PJM and Southeast, and then we really have MISO bringing up the rear. And so when you go to talk to somebody about a MISO solar project or MISO solar and storage project, it's going to be basically a crickets-like conversation, because they're just waiting for MISO to kind of get in gear with FERC 841. Whereas California, there's a mandate coming down from the state level, the CPUC, saying bring online as many megawatts and megawatt hours as you can now, and kind of forego your very robust procurement processes to bring on megawatts and megawatt hours. And then we have, as we've already talked about, with storm situations and weather situations, Texas is Texas is on the cusp of probably exploding some more, but they're still trying to take it carefully to figure out how, if there's going to be this onslaught of batteries coming on the market in Texas, how is it going to actually happen? And again, that market is having to rewrite their rules to properly incorporate batteries into the system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it seems like it's such a lot of utilities are still figuring things out, and I want to talk about battery chemistries and types. I mean, I think it's understandable that lithium is dominant within the residential market, but I mean, there are other technologies that are entering larger projects. I wanted to go to Molly. Are you looking at anything besides lithium, or how are you getting comfortable with all of this new technology as it's emerging? Because everybody's trying to get comfortable with it.
Yeah, we're primarily still lithium right now, especially on the more mid-scale projects. We've looked at flow technology for a few things, but it just hasn't quite worked out for us. A lot of what we're having to deal with is, as these new projects are coming up, are things like remediation plans and decommissioning plans, and we've all had to do those for solar, but what does that look like for a storage system? So that's really what we're focusing on right now with our current projects. But we have a team, I'll say it in a polite way, we're all a little bit technology geeky. So we love just being out there and learning about everything we can, reading all the papers about what new technologies might be coming down the pipeline. But right now, if you're looking at anything commercially viable, we're typically going to just be sticking in that lithium realm.
When I asked that same question for Brent with the larger projects, are you also just kind of sticking with lithium right now?
Not kind of, we are. Again, it gets back to it, and I agree with Molly's comments. Is there's lots of discussions and there's lots of tire kicking, and we do stay connected with the market because we want to be with, or maybe a little bit ahead of the market, to understand what's next in terms of different technologies and chemistries, and in particular get into this long duration. It's going to happen at some point. It's just a matter of when. We haven't engineered or built anything but lithium-ion battery projects, and I think it's probably, at least for us, it's going to be a couple more years before we're involved in some sort of utility scale pilot. When you think about what are the things that are potentially impeding the implementation of flow battery projects, and what works best on at the utility scale, it's really what passes the diligence efforts. And are these technologies, are they thoroughly technically defined? Do the electrical operating characteristics fit with currently available power electronics? Really basic things. Can the makers of this technology, can they describe, and can they describe how they're assembled and how they're procured, how they're tested and how they're commissioned with simplicity and straightforwardness? And to us, these are really important factors, which, when they're properly communicated, we can then turn them around into commitments to our customers. And so we want to be able to do that, to vouch for the technology. And so we look for that. And it's not simple, but we're looking for that certain message. And a lot of that has to do with how well is it communicated. And there's a lot of people who are looking at this. And I think that that's one of the things that's getting in the way. And there's been some testing that's been done out there, and some pilot projects. And if there were large utility scale projects happening now, I think we'd see them, and we're just not seeing them yet.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I know supply shortages kind of plague many areas of solar, whether it's, solar panel shortages due to tariffs or COVID or anything like that. Scott, you've mentioned people maybe requesting Tesla, and I know Tesla has been facing some shortages. What's your battery supply situation like? Do you have enough to meet demand?
Well, now that they got that boat out of the Suez Canal, I'm golden. Right? Something, we're never going to be there. I'm hoping that my demand always outweighs my supply. But we've been, in the residential market, you live and die by your referral. We held back a long time before we entered the market. to exactly what Brent and Molly said. There's got to be a story behind this product. Is it robust? Is it going to be there? Is it going to deliver for your customer? Because if it doesn't deliver for the customer, you got a lot of problems on your hands. We adopted the Teslapowwow. We had Powerwall 1, 2, and now all the next versions are out. I'm fortunate because I have a great relationship with Tesla. I'm an approved contractor for them. I do their Tesla roof. I do their EV charging. So I've navigated myself into a different supply chain than many others. Tesla's also very smart about, they pick which horse they want to go to the race with, and they try to feed that horse and make sure that they're in the race. We're all struggling a little bit. We have our peaks and valleys, but, I want that. I want my customer to say, hey, listen, you want this. This is the coolest, latest, sexiest thing out there. You're going to have to wait a couple of months for it. But you know what? It's going to be there for years and years to come, the same way as your solar system. So, take a pause. You want the best. You want the very best. That being said, we've installed systems from Panasonic. We've installed LG Chem, Sonnen, you name it, Enphase. So I'm not, if a client wants something, I can do it. But our go-to-market strategy is always to say very focused. This is our product. This is what my guys can troubleshoot. This is what we want to grow with, this product and this team. And right now, Tesla's, that you just can't touch the sexiness of that brand.
Yeah, and the I guess Elon bros really like to come at us on Twitter to talk about how sexy everything is too.
Listen, he's the blessing and the curse to the industry.
Right. We had a really good question come in from the audience that maybe I want to direct to Molly. Somebody's asking, does chemistry safety play into your discussions with customers? And that's probably more of, there's two really dominant lithium-based batteries, the ones with cobalt and then the lithium phosphorus one. And so does that come into your conversations with customers, Molly?
Yes, it absolutely does. And that, I mentioned remediation really briefly, but if we're working with like a municipality or something like that, then we have to have full-on plans on what to do if something would go horribly wrong. But we also work in a lot of different climates. So we have to look at the temperature ranges of the different types of lithium chemistries. And so if we know that we're going into a climate that's going to have more extreme swings or is going to be a little bit outside of the typical lithium chemistry, then we might move them to something else. So it is something that we take into account on every project.
Okay, interesting.
Hey, can I touch on that also, Kelly?
Please.
In New York City, there is absolutely no storage right now in the New York City region. That's basically because of FDNY and safety protocols. But right now, there is a project out there that we're going to be doing, and they've isolated about 300 homes in the Queens area. That is, if this was a baseball game, they're probably at the 7.5 inning with getting approval for some storage in the New York City area. So that's really exciting, and it's always been about safety.
So I'm assuming those batteries are they LFP? Do they have to have like special fire suppression around or anything like that?
No, I mean, we're talking about standard Powerwalls, honestly. It's a VPP system. It's a virtual power plant system that I'm doing with Swell. And it's a really interesting project. A lot of people have attempted it, but this one is like, it's getting close. And that'll really tip. Once there's something built, you got to have something. Somebody's got to get through the blocks to get going.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, if New York City can get it going, then yeah, it'll definitely take off. All right. So I think it is a little bit easier to understand how batteries work in residential situations, offering backup or assisting, commercial entities with their demand rates. Brent, I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit, like, how do you size utility scale batteries? What are you trying to accomplish? Like, what megawatt size is big enough? How do you do that?
Yeah, so I think we're at a crossroads in the market where even though several system integrators will still take on overall plant performance, we're seeing, and I think this trend will continue, that some of those companies, call them energy storage equipment packages, that they'll resort to an individual specified item with an individual characteristics, not an entire plant. So they'll give you and I'm greatly simplifying this very complex market, but they'll give you a box and say the box has this kind of characteristics. And then our customers come to us and say, figure out all of the rest. Figure out all of the design and the physical integration, and in some cases, depending on technology, thermal management, and then fire suppression systems and fire alarm and monitoring systems, and again, getting into the overall plant performance, really with the aim to be grid compliant and then also PPA compliant. So our in-house engineering team, we're taking these PPA requirements and sizing systems to ensure that they have these minimum critical power and energy at the high voltage level. So then when we do the substation or any sort of interconnect work, we have to take all of that into consideration for when we're sizing the energy storage system, because we've got to overcome round trip efficiencies, and we have to deal with increased losses over time, increased levels of auxiliary power loads as batteries degrade and they create more power and they take more power to keep them cool. So it's a pretty complex formula, but essentially what you're doing is you're trying to take on the commitments that our developers are making with PPAs, and then ensuring these and guaranteeing these plant performance. When it comes to looking at getting to your big topic, and you've got to really take all these environmental conditions, variable battery use cases, commercial commitments, and then what I believe is still a little bit of a mystery in terms of how these batteries are truly going to operate over a 10 or 15-year period, and then have the right kind of executable, robust, and at the same time cost-effective formulas, because it's a competitive market, and we're having to figure out what's the best solution for our customers. And then when you talk about big, these projects are now turning into projects that have hundreds, if not thousands of battery enclosures with thousands of modules. And one of the concerns about getting too big is that if you just get one of those characteristics wrong, you're going to be back fixing something 1,000 times. Right. And so you have to go through the diligence, and you have to be realistic about really the lack of historical data. And every time somebody comes up with a new chemistry, the baseline for that historical data gets reset. And so it's not like everybody has started with the same type of chemistry, the same type of formula between nickel, manganese, and cobalt for those who use those metals in their batteries. And then you just say, start building data from there, because in 2 years, the data set changes or the baseline changes. And so there's this lack of robust historical data, which I think the industry is sorely needing to really be able to figure out what is the way to standardize these projects and the ability to accurately predict performance, which then gets turned into how do you design the right plant around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, it's still very early days. A lot of testing has to be done. Mm-hmm. We have another really, really interesting question come in from the panel or the audience. Maybe I could direct it to Scott. What are you thinking about the accessibility of storage technologies to the non-wealthy? You did say that, you kind of have the range of customers. So how can we make sure that there's, storage technologies for everyone? How are we making sure that everybody has access to it? 95%, maybe more of my systems are fully financed. So regardless, if you have a reasonable credit score, I have 5 or 6 products that are both solar and storage. So it's definitely not just for the, I don't use that word wealthy a lot. As somebody who lives on Long Island, my poor is wealthy in Montana, so, but there's a lot of different financing methods to get there, to get to the same goal. All right. So that is definitely not a barrier whatsoever. And they all have them. Coupled with PV, there's always there's at least 5 or 6 different financing options that include batteries as well. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Can I jump in on this one too, Kelly?
Please.
Our project down in Nebraska that we're currently working on is a solar plus storage project, but it's actually a community solar project as well. And we were able to get under the baseline price from the utility. So everyone who buys into that community solar project is actually going to have a savings on their bill. It's not an adder. So that's a great example where you can have kind of those dual use technologies combined into one system that allows access for everyone within the community and not just certain individuals or not just for the utility company.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great insight. So I thought we'd kind of wrap up our little section of this. You can still submit some questions in the Q&A box on your screen, and we'd be happy to continue the conversation. But I thought we'd wrap up just talking about the future of solar plus storage. So I thought we'd go back to Brent with Mortenson. How does Mortenson look at the future of solar and storage projects? You kind of talked about it, like the big markets right now are California and Texas, but do you expect to do more separation of solar and storage and just doing more like standalone storage?
I think both are still going to be prevalent for some time. To date, the work in Texas has largely been standalone storage. We're seeing several of our existing customers come to us and want to renovate their existing solar projects that might either be completed or under construction and quickly trying to pivot to add batteries to them. The interconnection process in ERCOT doesn't really support that to do it real nimbly. So there's still, you're still going to be in this overall 2-year planning cycle before projects come online. Again, this Texas energy emergency that happened earlier in the year is forcing a lot of that, and they're really rethinking their overall grid. So that's a good thing because that means more batteries are going to come online. When you make a distinction between a solar and storage project and a standalone storage project, you still got to really understand what is its business case, because those who are installers might look at a standalone storage project as one that's just a battery and nothing else. But that project might be added to an existing solar project. And that business case for how that battery is going to operate and integrate with that existing solar project, I would contend is still a solar plus storage project because it's going to operate that way. Whereas a standalone storage project in Texas, which might be there to take advantage of nodal price spikes and also frequency regulation, ancillary services, will operate differently, will make money for owners differently than if it were to essentially extend the usability of a solar project by shifting the energy in the evening period of time. So you've got to really understand what the business case is, and I think they're all going to still move forward. What I'm really interested in, and I'm quasi excited for it, is to figure out when big batteries are going to be just plugged into the bulk power system and be done by regulated utilities who are at this. They're not at a crossroads because they don't know what to do yet, because an energy storage project that is plugged into a transmission line is going to not be allowed to be owned by a generator. And so who's going to own the asset, and how is that asset going to be defined? And so when we start talking about getting projects plugged into or owned by utilities on the 345 kV, 500 kV, 765 kV systems, is going to be really interesting to see how that develops and how those projects will actually provide benefit to the utilities and the independent system operators, and who's going to actually move forward and build them. We're seeing a lot more utility-driven renewable energy. Xcel Energy does a lot of work where they're moving forward with wind power and solar power that they're going to own and operate, and we're on the cusp of trying to figure out when's your next big battery project going to be.
I have a question for you, Brent. Is it easier for you to maybe add storage to an existing solar array after the fact, like just connecting like through the transmission and all that, compared to doing a standalone storage? Is the infrastructure already there with the solar project, or do you need to do extra work to add that storage onto that site?
You will have to do extra work to add storage to an existing solar project. You're going to have to renovate the control systems. You're going to have to renovate the protection systems, and you're going to have to make sure that the auxiliary power and the metering. So there's a fair amount of renovation work that still happens when you're renovating a solar project with a storage project. At the end of the proverbial day, it's still probably more cost effective than just plucking down and doing a new greenfield standalone storage project. Again, it comes down to the business cases. Why are you building the battery? Who's it going to benefit, and how's it going to make money?
Gotcha. Okay. Molly, what does the future of commercial solar plus storage look like?
I think it's going to get a lot busier in the next few years. There's a lot of benefits on the commercial side that we've talked about, including, demand savings, peak savings, resiliency, but there's also a push for green and sustainable businesses. So what the commercial industry has that they can actually put out to the world is that, yes, they are trying to be a green and sustainable businesses. And this is just another tool kind of in their tool belt, so they can kind of have the perfect trifecta of maybe we can save some money. We're going to make sure that we don't go down during an outage, and we can actually use this as a marketing tool to say that we're a green business. So I'm very, very excited at some of the opportunities that we've been working on, and can't wait to get a few of these projects in the ground and prove some use cases so we can let everybody know how it goes.
Definitely. Scott, what's your outlook on solar and storage in the residential market?
So, I'm riding the horse into the battle. We've had a couple of instances here that have really sparked this industry. First of all, COVID has been a blessing. I mean, we were shut down for 12 weeks. I don't want to say it was a blessing that way, but from the new norm, every one of you seems to be working from home, so the new norm, right? Then we had a power outage named Isaias. So I'm very involved in a lot of business groups, and I started challenging some of my colleagues, CEOs of a bank, and I said, so let me ask you a question. Right now, you work remote. Yes, I am. How much did you spend to outfit your team to work remotely? $1.27 million. That's great. What happens if the power goes out? And he looked at me like I had three heads. He goes, well, I don't know. What do you mean? I says, well, there's every indication that you will have connectivity through, your Fios provider or whoever else. But without power, without a reliable power source at home, you're shut down. How about your executive team? Do any of them have reliable power at their house in case of an outage? And not one of them did. And all of a sudden, it was $150,000 PV and solar system over here. And it was 3 batteries over here. And it's, so people are starting to understand that if this is going to continue, it's absolutely vital that people have resilient power and reliable power at their home so that they can conduct their businesses. So that was the single greatest takeaway that's happened, in the residential storage industry right now from a business perspective. It's really, really enlightening people. So, I'm all in. What I've seen in this industry for so long, I agree with my colleagues that the technology has to be tried and true. You cannot go out there with. I love the fact there's a guy right now taking in a garage that's going to come up with the next great thing, and we'll all see him, at SPI and stuff like that. But I've seen so many solar systems, so many inverters that came to market and failed because either they weren't, they didn't have the proper capital, the idea, whatever. And if you adopt too soon, you're going to have to answer those questions and go back on those 1,000 calls. So right now, I think that they've done a really good job of bringing products to market that have the software that makes it all tick, that it's simple. Now it's about reducing costs, okay, and making the case for it that way. And every home, is going to have an EV charger. It's going to have an EV charger, a storage option, and PV on the roof. It's just not, it's not if, it's just when.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. There are some questions I do want to get to from the audience. And I know you guys have talked about, there's the tried and true, chemistries. We have to make sure that stuff is proven. And a tried and true chemistry is lead acid. And I released a story on solarpowerworldonline.com this week about how people are saying, lead acid, it's dead in solar, and for storage, like lithium is definitely more dominant. But I'm wondering, Molly, you kind of said that you guys were geeky about chemistries and everything. Do you still, or even you, Scott, are you guys looking at lead acid at all, or is it the software that is really from the lithium side that is becoming more dominant?
I'll jump in on that one. We're pretty remote here out in South Dakota, and some of our early solar business was cabins in the middle of nowhere that you can't run lines to. So we've used a lot of lead acid in the past. We haven't done quite as much off grid in the past few years as we did in the early days. So we've moved predominantly to lithium, and they're just a little more difficult to take care of. If you don't treat the system right, it's not going to work correctly for you. And a lot of homeowners and especially, off-grid cabin owners aren't necessarily have the wherewithal to be able to manage or maintain a system like that on their own. Lithium's a little easier to deal with it from that aspect. So I don't know if you had anything else to add, Scott.
Yeah. For me, it's got to be in a really cool looking box, and it's got to have a really cool warranty. That's what I always really want to see. Technology is going to change. There's no question about that. For me, we look at where is this battery going to go? How big does it have to be? The end-phase system is quite a bit smaller, but needs a little bit more space when we talk about New York State building codes. So we're really looking at logistics, but by the same token, getting the Powerwall down into a basement, it's cumbersome. So we're always going to be looking for the product that's going to take the residential market into in play, really make it easy to work with, reliable. The technology inside, really, if it doesn't work, they're going to call us. If it doesn't work, we're going to get RMA the product. So, again, it's got to be in a cool box, and it's got to have a great warranty to it to work.
Yeah, that's true. Like a lot of homes that want to have battery technologies, they don't usually have that room off the side of their house that could house a bunch of lead acid batteries or the size of what they need. So you really kind of have to take that into consideration.
Yeah. And listen, we've had people like, you'll go down a stair into a basement, and, we could have put the power walls, six bank power walls. We could have put them over there by the boiler. They wanted it dead center so that when everybody walked downstairs, they framed out an area for their power walls.
Yeah. We have another question here about the commercial space, Molly. What types of financing is being used for solar and storage in the commercial space?
It's going to depend on the market and what you're allowed to do. Some markets you can do commercial PPAs in. Some you would have to do some kind of leasing. A lot of the corporations that we're working with have a tax appetite. So they're actually using the projects for the tax credits as well. That's something that's very attractive to them. So we don't get asked, especially if it's a larger entity that has like a corporate mandate behind them. We don't get asked a lot for those types of financing, but there are options available, just depending on which state and which market you're in and what you're allowed to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We have another question asking about how are you handling arc flash design and what are you seeing as a minimum distance from the face of the rack to maintain safe working clearances? I don't know if anybody might have some insight on that.
I send it to my engineering team.
Okay.
I guess we're talking about a residential application. So if it's a residential application, all the New York State building codes are going to apply. I think it's 3 feet in front of it, something like that's the same as an electrical panel. But
so we're not going to be putting those Teslapowwows in the middle of living rooms and everything else.
No, but